Captives set free in Uganda, a different take on the border crisis, and yes, this is a monkey on my head. I'll explain everything on today's Hot Zone.
This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, thanks for watching. I'm Chuck Holton, and this is the Hot Zone podcast. Why is there a monkey on my head? Well, I'll tell you. Some of you might know that we have a couple of these as pets here at the house. And one of the things that we've learned is that the monkey's goal in life is to get to the top of the food chain, get to the top of the troop, to move up. And this little one is our juvenile monkey. This is Missy. She's kind of a teenager. And my wife normally cares for her, but all of a sudden she's decided she can't live without me. And of course, I have that effect on women. So I'm kind of going everywhere with Missy here. She's giving me the kissy lips here. You see the kissy lips? And chewing all the hair off her tail and everything. So just acting really weird. We're trying to get a handle on it. And we may have to call our resident monkey trainer, or non-resident monkey trainer in Hollywood to find out what the heck I'm supposed to do with this monkey. Because I try to get her off. She doesn't want to get off me. She wants to stay on me all the time. So now we got that out of the way. We have a monkey on my head. Some people are asking where they can find the video version of this podcast. I was talking to somebody tonight, one of our wonderful listeners, and she said that she listens to the podcast on podbean.com, and that's fantastic. But she was wishing that she could watch it sometimes because we do have some great video on these podcasts. So I just wanted to take a minute and explain how to do that. The podcast goes up on Podbean, which then puts it out to lots of different platforms in audio format so that you can download it on your phone and listen to it while you're taking a walk or doing the dishes or driving or whatever. It also gets uploaded to opslens.com. If you go to opslens.com, that's the OpsLens TV channel. And OpsLens is the best place to watch the video. But if you can't get it there for whatever reason, you can go to YouTube and just do a search for the Hot Zone podcast with Chuck Holton, and you'll find our YouTube channel where you can watch the podcast every day, most days. Okay, come here, monkey. No, you guys stay here. You guys stay here. No, I know you crazy monkey. All right, so let's move on with the news and see if I can actually get this done with this crazy monkey here. So good news out of Uganda. The woman who was kidnapped with her driver last week on a safari, her name is Kimberly Sue Endicott, an American woman, 35 years old. She's apparently been found. Now, we haven't heard, they say she's okay, but we haven't heard if she was harmed in any way during the kidnapping. But she's alive, and that's a plus. They say that there was a ransom paid to get her back. And I'm very, very glad she's back. If she was my family, or your family, of course, you'd want to do whatever you could to get her back, and that, up to and including paying a ransom if you could. But let me just explain why that's a bad idea. When ransom gets paid for a kidnapping victim, what that does is it makes kidnapping profitable, and that engenders dozens or hundreds of other kidnappings. It just makes it a profitable business model, and so more and more people get into the business, and that makes it more dangerous for everybody around the world. And look, I've got friends that are in the business of negotiating and paying the ransoms for people who are kidnapped. And they'll tell you that it's hard to get somebody back if they get kidnapped without paying something to somebody. I know that I've been told by people in the intelligence industry that sometimes they won't pay the kidnappers, but they will pay for information leading to the release of the people who got kidnapped. And some of that money may end up filtering its way back to the kidnappers or somebody. Bottom line is, we don't want to reward bad behavior. And so the best way to avoid having to do that is to avoid being kidnapped at all. If you go back a couple episodes on last week's podcast, I talked about going through the kidnapping course. So see, the best thing you can do is avoid getting kidnapped altogether. And I talked on that episode about a couple of ways to avoid getting kidnapped. One is to never take an offered taxi. Very often, taxi drivers will either get paid to kidnap you, or it's not actually a taxi driver that picks you up. So I always try to surprise a taxi driver with a fare or take an Uber. Uber is a much safer way and easier way to take taxis most places around the globe. The other thing is to be very careful about who knows you're coming, who knows where you're staying, and who knows what your plans are for tomorrow. If it takes a while for kidnappers to come up with a plan to nab you most of the time. And so you can disrupt that plan by not giving them the information they need to make the decision to do it. And by being a hard target, be sometimes you've got to be hard to predict, unpredictable, right? And so that's what I would suggest. Mike Pompeo tends to agree that paying a ransom is not something that the U.S. government wants to get into. And he gave a speech about it back on April 2nd. Take a look at what that looked like.
For those of you who've had a chance to come visit my office, a handful of you did it today, you would have seen on the edge of my desk a Bible that I keep open every day to remind me of what matters most in our life. God and family, doing what's right, protecting the weakest. Every day you should know that Susan and I pray for you and your loved ones. And I want you all to know I'm not here today to instill in you any false hope. Sometimes our best simply is not enough. And we mourn all the men and women that have been wrongly detained and who have been lost to us. I met with some of their families today as well. What I can do today for each of you is to make my personal commitment known, to talk to you about what it is we're doing and we'll continue to do every day, our very best every day, to deliver every wrongfully detained American home. I want to talk to you in practical matters about what this commitment means, what this pledge means. You should know, I've been at this now for over 2 years, first as the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, and now in my role as Secretary of State. And the President asks every week for an update. He wants to know the status. He wants to know what we're doing and why we haven't been more successful. He's personally invested in the safe return in each and every one of them. I talk to my counterparts in foreign capitals regularly, seeking their assistance, trying to get our hostages home. Do it by phone. I do it from my office. Do it from my home office. I do it when I travel on the road. I talk to Robert, too, and our team to make sure that they're on track, that they're on mission. He and I have an incredibly close relationship working on this important mission set. He and his team spend every minute of their time at work liaising with the White House, with the Hostage Rescue Fusion Cell, with foreign governments to craft creative diplomatic strategies to pressure our enemies to release our people. He meets, too, with congressmen on both sides of the aisle. He works to keep families as well informed as we can. And he and his team, too, think about this 24/7. How is it that we can get just one more good result and then another? I saw this, too, when I was in the intelligence community. It was a priority for collection. We try to collect as much data as we can about loved ones, sometimes in very difficult places, hard places to get information. And they work with their counterparts, too, to see what they know. I wish I could talk about some of those more than we sometimes can, but know that they are extensive and real and ongoing. Our military, too, stands ready. Some of our bravest and most skilled warriors, ready to rescue when possible. In my personal experience, I must say that of all the places that all the government agencies work together, it is on this mission set where I find the most capability and people really focused on their mission. Intelligence professionals working to help us rescue Americans alongside of all of our diplomatic efforts. It is unparalleled in any other corner of our government. I think the reason you see this, whether it's folks in the legislative branch, folks in the executive branch working together, it's because this mission is deeply held in the American spirit. It is nonpartisan. It's a mission that is just. It's a mission that's right. And you should all know that we will never abandon our people. And I'm confident that the entire country is with us and with you in this endeavor. As I close today, I want you all to know that sometimes it doesn't seem that way. Indeed, many of you shared experiences today where you were frustrated that not enough was being done. I understand how it can seem that way. I can't put myself in your place, but I understand that you want more. I understand that days sometimes turn into weeks and weeks into months and months into years. I implore you don't give up, don't despair. We will not. Don't be discouraged when you hear folks in the media say things that make no sense to you and to this mission. Please, too, don't despair if a particular member of Congress isn't doing everything you think that they need to do, that they're giving and they have a lack of attention to the plight of your family member. There are so many others working so diligently, acting as advocates for them from both houses and from both parties. Please, too, don't be discouraged by propaganda from our enemies. They want to divide us. They want to distract us from our mission to rescue your loved ones. Know that we are not distracted. I'd urge you to help us, be with us, and stay the course. I know, too, that there are those who've talked about this idea that the United States ought to return to the practice of paying ransom for exchanging the return of individuals back to the United States. I understand this plea from the bottom of my heart. Indeed, I am confident that if I stood in your shoes, I too would be willing to do anything. I can understand that the suffering is unspeakable, but please do remember, as we move in that direction, we create risk. Indeed, we know that there are nations that take Americans less because there's less money coming from America. I've seen it. I've seen the information. It's what's happened after we paid the mullahs in Iran. I've seen this kind of activity. Please remember that any payment to a terrorist or a terrorist regime gives money so that they can seize more of our people. We cannot accept that risk. You wouldn't ask that of us. Even a small payment to a group in, say, Africa can facilitate the killing or seizure of tens or even hundreds of others, including Americans or foreign nationals in that region. We also know for a fact that some terror groups don't seize Americans because we won't pay. It's a trend I want to continue.
So I have a piece airing today, Monday, on the 700 Club, CBN, and it's on the U.S. southern border, and it has an angle on the migrant crisis that you might not have considered before. I know I hadn't, and it's pretty interesting. But what I want to show you now is an extended version of that piece. And one of the reasons I started this podcast is because when I'm putting together a package like this, so much ends up on the cutting room floor that really is good stuff, but I just don't have time to show it all to you. So in this podcast, I can expand it and I can show you more of the information so that you can make a better decision, a better understanding of the issues at hand. And so take a look at this piece. While the tidal wave of migrants coming across our southern border dominates the news and the attention of the U.S. Border Patrol, transnational drug cartels are taking advantage of the surge to ship record amounts of drugs into the U.S. So far in this fiscal year, for example, Border Patrol seizures of cocaine are on pace to triple last year's totals, and that's just what gets caught. Tell me your name.
My name is Irma
And
Trujillo.
Trujillo.
Yes.
Okay. Explain to me why you're here today and what you just saw over there.
I am trying to, actually what I want to do is bring some urgency to the wall. I was hoping that we'd be able to speak to the commissioner and take him over to where the wall abruptly ends so he could see how bad it is. And there is an urgency. Yes, there is. They're coming in now. It was by the hundreds. Now it's by the thousands a day. We have to do something.
Yeah.
The catch and release is just either change the laws or, I don't know. It's scary. It really is.
So what are you seeing over here?
They're detaining these people here, and they're going to release them. Thousands of people are going to be released into our community, and we don't even know who they are. And what I just saw here was thousands of people that they just caught, that were just crossing from where there's no wall. It wasn't even the entrance, and they're going to release them now. It's a catch and release. That's Obama's they okayed. So we don't know where these people are going to go. They're never going to show up to court. The courts are going to be tied up for years. So now they're going to become our problem.
Well, and so solutions. Obviously, what do we need?
Send back.
We have to do something. I suggest that. I was hoping that they would just bring military. Martial law. Military. That's the only way.
Again,
martial law. They need to bring martial law. into effect. I mean, like immediately, there is an emergency, there's an urgency. And Nancy Pelosi went to the border, but she went to Laredo where everything was calm. Here it's not. It's crazy. And it's also the same thing in Tijuana, California. It's crazy.
Yeah. So people protesting, what's your feeling about that? I mean, obviously they have the right to say whatever they want.
They don't know.
It just doesn't sound like they have any answers.
No, they don't have any answers, and they don't even know what they're talking about. They just want to be a nuisance. You know, the liberals just, all they want to do is come in and they want to abrupt you. They want to just, no matter what it is, they want to make a lot of noise, but there is no solutions. No, it's a lot of yelling and no solutions whatsoever.
What's the answer? You know, I mean,
Trump is doing all he can do. He's already doing all he can do. We already did the declaration of emergency. What is it? Declaration of emergency? Uh-huh. What else can we do? What else can he do?
Well, the problem is
his hands are tied.
The Johnson family has been ranching 160,000 acres of the New Mexico desert for 4 generations. Joe Johnson oversees the ranch today.
Well, my grandfather came here in 1918. We've been here 101 years this year.
He's seen the makeup of people crossing his ranch change over the years.
I think people today, what we have coming through us mainly is the violence, the more violent type of people, the more drug traffic, more desperate type of people. This right here is what the Border Patrol calls 19 Canyon, right here. And we've been told many times we ought to stay out of here because of the danger aspect of it, but we can't. We have to keep an eye on our border, and this is where we've had a lot of cattle stolen right here in this draw right here.
The border in this case is nothing more than a barbed wire fence, which these ranchers built and paid for out of their own pocket in 1975. But drug runners cut the fence on an almost daily basis and drive across this ranch with thousands of pounds of cocaine, heroin, and other dangerous drugs. That's bad enough, but there's another risk the Johnsons have to face.
My dad, back in 1975, tried to find any government or federal agency to take responsibility of this boundary fence, and he couldn't find it. So he finally got permission from the IBWC to come off 3 feet of the existing barbed wire fence and build one out of his own pocket if he chose to. So in order to keep our cattle out of Mexico, that's what he did. This is all keeping us apart right now, and we've had theft, people coming out of Mexico stealing our cattle.
Joe's son Russell says not having a border barrier has cost them plenty.
We experienced a lot of sickness in our cattle from all these groups coming through, running cattle off of water, sending the cow one way and the calf the other way, come back a couple hours later and get run off again by all these people coming through. And they were breaking out into pasteurella pneumonia, which is a stress-induced disease that if not caught within 24 to 48 hours, they're dead. And the traffic was so bad in that area that we finally had to pull all of our cattle out of there so we didn't suffer anymore.
Cattle in Latin America seem to have a really great life. There's tons of rain, which means lots of green grass to munch on, but these cattle are not in as good a shape as the ones that we see in the United States. And the reason for that is because they don't get dewormed as often, and they don't get the kinds of injections that they need to ward off diseases like hoof and mouth disease. We haven't seen a case of hoof and mouth in the United States since the 1920s, but it's still common here in Latin America. And part of the reason for that is because of the care that they receive down here. But what that means is that there's a risk to the entire U.S. food chain if the germs from these cows somehow are able to make it across the northern border into the United States.
So if a bull crosses this fence out of Mexico and he comes back positive for trichomoniasis, say, then we would have to test all our bulls, and it would cost us approximately $5,000 the first test. If anything comes back positive, then we have to test them 2 more times. So that's $15,000. And that's not counting labor and feed and everything else to hold these bulls while they're going through their test. One of our worries is these people from coming way south could be carrying hoof and mouth on their feet. Mm-hmm. And we're told that can last a couple of weeks, I believe, on someone's feet. If they're getting up here before that, they could be walking across our ranch with hoof and a mouth on their feet.
A report last month from the Government Accountability Office sounded the alarm about this significant threat. It shows the United States would be unable to stop an outbreak of hoof and mouth disease quickly, as there's only enough vaccine available to treat a tiny fraction of American cattle and swine that could be affected. And that could cost American ranchers over $19 billion in lost exports alone. Johnson says he thinks there's a cheaper solution.
It's a struggle for us every day. And a very worrisome. I think the only way that things are going to get better is build a wall on this border.
From the U.S.-Mexican border, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News. Well, thanks for being with us today. Missy and I are, it's hard to do a podcast with a monkey on your lap. And I don't think Missy's real happy about it either. So we're going to call it a day, and I'm going to take her back out to her cage, and she's probably going to get a bath and then go to bed. And that's what I need to do too. I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching the Hot Zone podcast. I'm Chuck Holton.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.